welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Dr. Greer, and I would like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks to share information and experiences that we have with all of you regarding the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and DisclosureProject.org and the work we're doing on new energy systems through the OrionProject.org. And we're going to have a really interesting show today because we have a man with us who's been involved for a couple of years with CSETI and the contact protocols we developed using higher states of consciousness and a number of other techniques for making contact with transdimensional interstellar civilizations. And this is a gentleman who has really had some amazing experiences just in the last year and a half or so, and he is just an amazing example of the kinds of developments that can happen when you really give yourself to the process and to the meditation protocols and techniques that we have developed. And his name is Dr. Bill Gray. He's a Stanford-trained medical doctor. He does really pioneering work in homeopathy, and he's actually developing an app for homeopathy that will be, I think, a really big breakthrough, and he may want to mention that as well. And he first started coming to things about a year and a half ago and came for a full week at Crestone, Colorado, back in 2011, I believe it was, and then has come to several of these expeditions since then. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Bill, and I'm so glad you can be here.
Oh, I'm very pleased to be here myself.
Oh, great. Well, why don't you tell folks just a little bit about, how you got involved and your experiences that began to develop, because it's really a great story.
Well, it really is a lifelong thing, being interested in UFOs and so on. I come from an aviation family, and I've always been fascinated by what goes on in the sky and so on, but nothing really developed until just in the last, like you say, the last year and a half. I also was a meditator for about 40 years, but I also found using different techniques in meditation that I really wasn't getting anywhere. I seemed to be focusing too much on the techniques and didn't have any way of judging whether I was making progress or not, and that frustrated me. So when I heard about Stephen's work with CSETI, I thought, well, if that's possible, then I'd really like to learn that. And so I signed up for first a 3-day program in Southern California that was actually very interesting and taught me that the meditative experiences that I could have were outstanding. But the real transformation happened when I was in Crestone for the 7-day program. And just to fill in what happens is we go out in the evening, late evening, and we're under the stars in a circle, and we all do several meditations, some of them guided by Stephen, and some just on our own. And I was having my normal meditative experiences when Stephen suggested that we could just literally ask for the ETs to show themselves to us in consciousness, and then also suggested that we could visit their planet. And so what happened to me was I took that very literally, and sure enough, an ET introduced himself to me, and it came inside my consciousness, unified with my consciousness, and took me to his planet. And
right.
I could tell detailed experiences about that, but it was a very real experience. I mean, just as real as I am right now. It was a profound experience for me.
Yeah, we want to describe some of that because it was so very graphic. I remember when it happened, and I remember the meditation when it happened because it was a very deep and higher consciousness experience. That
the whole group was very coherent. That's one of the tricks of this whole process, or one of the fundamental elements. The whole group was very unified, and so the meditation went much deeper than what I can do on my own generally. But in this very coherent state, it was a very deep meditation. Actually, first what happened is I went through a series of kind of car racing sort of things in black and white, which was interesting, which I later figured out is probably the ET's electronic connections with consciousness being enhanced to connect with me. Probably needed a little bit of tuning. So what was happening was I was experiencing something, but it wasn't exactly what they were trying to communicate.
Right.
And when I said, well, I don't want to do that anymore, then all of a sudden I was on his planet, and there was a tall being about Stephen's size, about, I'd say, 6 feet 4 or 5, something like that, brown-skinned, bald head, but with kind of a little shock of reddish hair coming out of the top of his head and down to his shoulders. He was normal human shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, normal torso. His face was kind of, he had sort of a squarish jaw and thin lips and very deep and very loving eyes. And the experience I had was of great compassion and great respect at the same time.
Right,
and
right.
Inviting me, just as I had been inviting him, he was inviting me to have a relationship. And he showed me around his planet, which is a small planet, kind of a sharp horizon, greenish yellow sky, kind of yellowish ground. But actually we were walking on a portion of the ground that was jet black and very firm, which I later learned just from reading that is a sign of an early stage of development of a planet.
That's right, right.
Which I didn't know at the time. So it's an interesting confirmation. And we communicated telepathically, rapid-fire questions that I had, where he was from, which he didn't answer for security reasons, I understand. But what his job is as an ambassador. He lives mostly in space, and he's an ambassador to all kinds of planets that are undergoing transformation, just like we are. And so he's anxious to make contact, and he's not the only one. They're all very anxious. It's just that we're not very open. So
right.
It took an opening on my part to be able to communicate with him. Since then, he's taken me on his craft, shown me around. As a matter of fact, later on in the week in Crestone, his craft showed up behind me in association with sounds that we've associated with him on my magnetometer.
Right.
And it's a very lyrical kind of symphonic type sound. And towards the end of the week, both happened. The magnetometer and one person in our group could see him in subtle form, and also a lot of the group saw the craft behind me. And when I turned around, it had the exact lighting that I saw when I was with him originally.
Right, and I want to put in a little bit here for people who are new, that a lot of what Bill's talking about is the fact that these interstellar civilizations or technologies interface directly with thought and consciousness. And back in 1991, I wrote a paper that made its way through the aerospace industry and the CIA. I later learned about technology-assisted consciousness and also consciousness-assisted technology. And these are very high-voltage electromagnetic scalar systems that are longitudinal electromagnetic waves, meaning that they don't have the sine wave of normal electromagnetic waves such as light or microwave, and they are actually at multiples of the speed of light. And these technologies are so well developed and refined that they interface with lucid consciousness and what people, the mystic tradition would say, the astral dream state. And the reason these protocols work, because it's based on the Vedic understanding of the consciousness that's within us being this omnipresent field of the samadhi state, of the infinite mind, that we go through a series of protocols. We actually do a puja every evening, and then we do a meditation using a mantra. And then from there, I take people on a journey, as it were, with an expansion of consciousness that begins to expand and experience the whole cosmos. And actually, you can go to disclosureproject.org. There's a whole training program for this on the website there that you can get. And the reason these are effective is because, we use like iPhones and Androids and cell phones that are traveling at the speed of light. But if you're going from one star system to another, the speed of light is too slow, because it would take, they say, from the Andromeda galaxy, that's millions of light years away, it would take millions of years at the speed of light or at the speed of a radio signal or a cell phone signal for a signal to get there, and then millions of years to reply. So any of these interstellar civilizations that we, of course, have proven are here through the Disclosure Project work have to have technologies that drop out of linear space-time into these trans-dimensional or other dimensions, utilizing very advanced electronics that are these high-voltage, low-current systems that actually, if we could develop them here, would give us also free energy and anti-gravity on Earth, and we'll get into that in a moment. But in terms of contact protocols, the reason people have these experiences when they have a breakthrough like Dr. Gray is describing is because they have gone into a very deep and quiet state of consciousness that I help people develop that ability. And we're doing it as a group, and we're intentionally inviting the ETs to interface with us, and they do. And when you have that experience, then you'll suddenly find, once you make that connection, we'll have these magnetic field meters that pick up the change in the magnetic field that's around you. And these are used by electronics people to test devices and things, but we're out in remote areas where there is no electronic source of radiation or magnetic fields. And suddenly they will start making a sound that they don't make if you just put them up to a cell phone or a refrigerator or a microwave. They'll make these sort of very communicative, as if they're talking through the electronics. And in fact, that is what they're doing. They're connecting to the circuitry in an energy field that's nonlinear, and they're causing the magnetic field to shift in a way that these devices become a communication device. And you can actually feel, and I know, Bill, you've experienced this, the emotion and the meaning of what they're communicating, even though it's through this, just this dumb box that you can buy for $200 that, picks up magnetic field changes around electronic devices. And so it's really amazing. And it's very specific to each being, and it's very communicative, and, well, it's just mind-blowing to people when they first experience it, I think.
I've had a number of other experiences with other ETs, but I have to say that the communication that we do through the magnetometers are probably the most valuable to me. I go out about once a week. I live in the mountains, and I have a little clearing, and I just sit out there. And instantly, when I turn on the magnetometer, every single time for the last, every week for the last year and a half, they are there instantly. And now that I've met a number of other ETs, they all have their own signals, and they sort of all chime in at once. I mean, one after the other. And even just the night before last, there was a new ET. There was a dolphin ET that we just had a recent experience with in Borrego Springs. Laura was there, the one from Crestone. Another one I call Charmine. And they each express themselves one after another for 45 minutes straight. And the thing that I find most valuable is, as I meditate, that becomes like a biofeedback mechanism. The deeper I go, the more excited they get. And if I start getting tired or too cold or I want to go in, then I say to myself, just mentally, okay, that's enough for tonight, and they instantly shut off. They instantly stop communicating, which is not a magnetometer anomaly of some sort. And, for me, that's an extreme interaction with beings from all over the universe. It's just an amazing experience, and it's available to everybody.
It is available to everyone, and it's interesting because now we have an iPhone and an Android app where the meditation protocols and techniques and all that's in there, and actually will turn your smartphone into a magnetometer. They'll turn it into a magnetic field meter, although your phone isn't going to be as good as one of these commercial devices that we use, and I know that Bill has gotten as well. The other thing I want to point out is that while we're having these conversations with these electronic devices, we're also having the remote view experience where in consciousness we're seeing these beings, and then around us with our physical eyes we're seeing these energy forms, and many of them, a lot of the photographs that Emery Smith and other people have taken, Deb Warren, there will actually be beings there. And if you go to CSETI.org, you'll see a picture that was from 3 years ago where an ambassador from the Andromeda galaxy literally was there in this electronic astral projection. It's as if it was like the Rosicrucians, but if you could electronically digitize your astral body and make it appear so it could be in a photograph, that's what this looks like, hovering right outside our circle during our contact protocol in Joshua Tree National Park. And for many people, all this sounds so futuristic and far out, and yet I tell people, but it totally makes sense that the primary science of any interstellar civilization is the science of consciousness and this kind of knowledge, because once you go beyond the speed of light, you are in these other dimensions that are increasingly like a lucid dream or an astral body projection or a deep meditation that's very visual. And I always tell people that the number one way that humans have had contact with these other civilizations over the millennia of known human history have been in these sort of states of consciousness, although along with that we will then have these electromagnetic manifestations and even craft fully materialize around us or in the sky and fly over, which of course we have on videotape and photograph. But it happens on every dimension. So it's physical, it's electromagnetic, it's in thought and consciousness, and it's very personal because there's this deep personal and emotional and spiritual connection that begins to develop with these ETs, because they're actually very excited, is what I've been told for the last 20-some years that I've been training people to do this since 1990, that there are groups of people who are beginning to understand the science of consciousness and the science of the next millennium, of the ending of the Mayan calendar is next week, but it's really the end of that old world that's stuck in the box of linearity and 3D, and the opening of a whole another understanding where the conscious dimension of the cosmos, even scientifically, will be added to our culture in terms of higher states of consciousness and technologies that reflect that higher state of consciousness. And this is required in order for anyone to be an ambassador from Earth to these people, which is what we call our training program, as ambassadors to the universe, because we feel that unless someone becomes adept in this process of meditation and remote viewing and understanding this new cosmology that incorporates the conscious universe along with these new high-tech electromagnetic, very high voltage scalar systems, they're not going to be able to understand any contact they're going to have with an ET civilization. They're not going to be able to even comprehend the various ways that ETs will manifest in your backyard or in your room or out under the stars in a national forest somewhere, because you'll have no foundation for understanding it, because we're dealing with civilizations that are anywhere from several 100,000 to several million years technologically more developed than we are now. And for us to begin to have an experience that begins to make any sense, we have to develop a paradigm and very specific technical understanding so that we can comprehend how they're interacting with us, what they're saying, how they're saying it. And that's what this whole week-long training process is for, although the week goes by very quickly, and we always feel like we should be there for a month or two. But people have had one of the great things about Dr. Gray is that he gave himself to this in a very pure-hearted way, and as I see it as the teacher of this, is that he gave himself to it in a way that was pure-hearted and wholehearted, and that's why he had these breakthroughs so quickly. And I've seen this happen before. The thing that keeps people from being able to do this is that their intellect gets in the way, and they say, I can't do this, or I won't do it. Instead of just following the protocols and going with the flow of it, and if you kind of just give yourself and go with the flow of it, it's really easy.
One thing I might add, just in case people aren't too familiar, is the fusion in consciousness that happens in communing with the ETs is not like a trance state. It's not like you're, becoming a medium and you're not yourself and you're becoming them. It's a real intimate connection with another consciousness, but with full awareness and respect, actually, for your own consciousness. So it's a two-way street interaction.
Right.
And you can always, if you decided that you were bored or you wanted to do something else, they are completely and totally respectful that way. And on the other hand, if you're very open and ask them to show what they're doing, what their daily life is, and all that sort of thing, they're perfectly happy to do that.
Right, and the same begins to extend into the sort of more 3D aspects. I mean, I have found that when you open up a link to these interstellar civilizations and you let them know that you're willing to let them communicate through a radar detector or a magnetometer, and that you're open to that, then it will happen, because they know that you put your awareness on it and that you're alert to that. So what my experience has been over the years is that this is an evolving thing, and I think another thing that's so beautiful is that they want it to be interactive, and they're not going to do things beyond what people are ready for. But if you're ready for it, then it's like, the sky's the limit.
Anything's the limit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so wonderful. And then it can continue in the lucid dream state, or, just in your own meditations when you're on your own. And I tell people that we're at this point right now. Everyone thinks that this is sort of a cycle with the ending of the Mayan calendar and everything that is about Earth, but it's not. It's actually a universal cycle that this big Earth cycle is coinciding with. So what's happening is that we're syncing up with a big universal cycle of unity, of higher consciousness that is sweeping not just Earth, but the entire cosmos. And so there's this potentiation. And, within the next few hundred years, every planet in the physical cosmos is going to be united. And that process, though, is being accelerated right now. And so it's not just about world peace. It's about universal peace. It's not just about a new human cycle. It's a universal cycle. And so we're in a universal moment. And this is really an amazing thing to contemplate. And when you step into doing this, because I joke often that, Hillary Clinton isn't doing this, and she's our Secretary of State, and the UN Secretary Generals and the ones I've met with and dealt with personally aren't doing this. Therefore, who's doing this on Earth? Well, it has to be we the people, and it has to be people who have a certain level of enlightened knowledge about consciousness and remote viewing and very advanced electronic technologies, and how faster than the speed of light civilizations who are capable of reaching here might manifest. And there's this latest book we put out a couple years ago called Extraterrestrial Contact, Countdown to Transformation, which you can find at Amazon.com and also at etcontactnow.com. I think that if you look at that book, it has, kind of a synopsis of decades of these sorts of experiences from our group. And there's also a DVD that comes with it that has a number of really amazing images of the contact that's happened over the years. But what we find is that it really doesn't matter where you are. A lot of people say, well, do you have to be, at Mount Shasta? Or do you have? I said, no. I mean, I think, Bill, you tell people you live out in an area in
I'm in the mountains above San Jose, between San Jose and Santa Cruz, and there's really nobody around.
Right.
And so it's completely isolated, but it happens every single night for me.
Yeah. Exactly. And so once that contact is made, it begins to continue, and it will continue, and it can happen in all kinds of enigmatic ways. And people have to be open to the idea that it can happen in the meditative state, it can happen in the dream state, it can happen in three-dimensional space-time with a craft or a being that's right there. And they're very eager for people to learn to do this because they know that this next phase in human existence is one of the development of not just material sciences that would get us off of oil and gas and coal, which we certainly need to do and really should have happened 100 years ago, but also the ability to understand mass cancellation technologies, things that enable, for example, a craft to achieve zero mass and therefore blip into another dimension and go from one star system to another. And of course, this has been done in classified programs that I'm aware of. But humans are going to have to begin to understand a whole new area of science that isn't being taught at Caltech and MIT and what have you, because these have been unfortunately kept secret. This is why my autobiography sort of is called Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, because all of this has been hidden, and it's sort of a forbidden area to talk about it. And yet I find that when I talk to people who work or have worked with the CIA or very classified programs at Lockheed, they smile and go, yes, of course. I mean, this is where the action has been for decades. But the public doesn't know. What we're trying to do is bridge this big gulf, not only in terms of science and technology, but in consciousness and understanding, but put it into a paradigm of, instead of it just being a material science, it's really the foundation of a whole new understanding of reality, of ourselves, and it crosses into the healing arts, it crosses into communication systems and into our whole place in the cosmos. And while it's not a religious undertaking, it's a spiritual undertaking, because the root of it is the understanding of this, the oneness of consciousness and mind that is the foundation of all existence. And even physical material existence is actually consciousness phasing and resonating as atoms and subatomic particles and quarks and photons and what have you. And so once you begin to understand how the science of consciousness integrates into the new physics and these new energy sciences, but also that these technologies that are communication devices that ET civilizations have, those interface with clear, coherent thought emanating from a deep and quiet level of consciousness as easily as you and I deal with talking on a cell phone. And that sounds really magical to people when they first hear about it. And they think, oh, this can't be, and it's crazy. But you know what? If you went back, I live down the road here from Thomas Jefferson's house. If you went back a couple hundred years and showed Thomas Jefferson an iPhone or an Android phone with video streaming and FaceTime and Skyping and everything else, they would think that you were a witch or a warlock, or it would just be completely magical. And that's only 200 years. So we're dealing with civilizations that are in the thousands and in some cases millions of years more developed than we are right now. And so we have to have enough humility to understand that we have to explore and open our minds to these possibilities. And it's this impulse for curiosity and exploration and open-mindedness that's really so important if you're going to be an ambassador from humanity at this time in history to these civilizations. And I think that's the other thing. There's sort of a childlike innocence and joy of this kind of experience, isn't it, Bill? I think for many of us.
Yes, and it's mutual. It's they're as childlike and innocent and learning about us as we are about them.
Right.
And they're far advanced, but they, for them, unity in consciousness is literally unity in the entire cosmos, and change is happening all over the place. So the changes that we're undergoing here are just as important to them as any of the changes that they have in their daily life.
Right.
And they express that very clearly. They're very excited. This last time in Borrego Springs, I had contact with actually a family of ETs that sort of stayed with me. We communed for, I'd say, about 3 hours in the morning after connecting the night before, and then they even went through the day with me and continued on for a few weeks afterwards. I call them the tourists because they were fascinated by our planet and by what I could show them and what they could learn from my consciousness, as well as what they could show me of their planet.
Yeah, no, and that's how they really are excited about that. And the other thing that I found is that in the last couple of years in particular, there seems to be something that shifted with the work we've been doing, and that is that there are, at every one of these expeditions, there seem to be new civilizations that are being introduced to humans, meaning Homo sapiens from Earth, for the first time. And it's an interesting experience for them and for us.
And that's been part of the privilege of what's going on with me. I actually asked Thor to train me from their level to be an ambassador so that they could come to me and the shy ones can come to me and trust me. And that is what's been happening.
Right. Well, and I think that that's one of the things many people keep having happen after they come on these expeditions, and it begins to evolve, and then there are new groups that get introduced, and it really becomes very personal with these individuals, very similar to what happened, the night that my good friend and person who'd worked with me for years during the 1990s, that Sherry Adamek passed away. That night, she, in her spirit form, introduced me to this ET who I had never seen before, that I call Kindness, because she's sort of an incarnation of just pure kindliness. And this particular ET usually appears in a bluish-white craft, and virtually every expedition we've been on since 1998 for 14 years, this being has appeared in that craft, fully materialized in the atmosphere and film.
And we all have seen it.
Yes, everyone has seen this, and it becomes a very personal, longitudinal experience, and I think that's part of the dynamic. And as Rupert Sheldrake talked about, this morphogenic field is being created, where because enough people now, thousands of people are doing this in hundreds of locations all over the world, dozens of countries all over the world, that it's creating a shift in consciousness that's potentiating this future of integration between Earth and these other civilizations, and that more and more civilizations are being introduced to humans at this time in our history, even though the entire planet obviously isn't quite ready for prime time. We have a lot of wars and dysfunction and injustices and criminality and murderous behavior going on, and yet there's always got to be the leading edge pioneering group, and that's kind of what people who feel moved to do this end up being called to do.
And in terms of the transformation that I personally experienced, and I think others have too, there's nothing special about what's happening with me. It has had a profound effect. I mean, the meditation is validated for me in ways that I've never had before in 40 years of meditation experience. Now I know exactly what I'm experiencing all the time, and it's fed back to me very directly. But more than that, I noticed a change in my orientation towards life. When, things go wrong, I don't know, the power goes out or the phones go out or the internet goes out or, in practice things aren't going the way they should be. It used to be that I would get, appropriately upset about these things. And now I find that there's a lot more serenity because I'm seeing things from a much broader perspective, and in the infinity of the whole thing. All of these are just changes, and they're not anything so profound that I have to get overreactive about them. So I have to say the transformation that I've learned through the CSETI experience, and specifically, Stephen, through your meditation training, has had a profound effect on me.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think a lot of people, the only reason I keep doing what I'm doing is because of people like you who really are getting benefit, that are able to move forward. My aspiration has always been that I can share what I know to the point that I'm irrelevant. so I could depart.
Well, you haven't achieved that yet.
Yeah, I think I have actually. But by the way, those people who are we've been asking, people have asked. There are no more of these expeditions this year. There will be one in early February of 2013. On this island that we go to in the Gulf of Mexico. It's called Marco Island, Florida, and it'll be a week-long expedition, and you can find out about that at etcontactnow.com. That's etcontactnow.com, and I think there's still a few positions open for that for in February. And then there's also a schedule where we are planning to do of course, our week-long event in Crestone and also up at Mount Shasta in the summer and in the desert Southwest. And we're also going to be going to England to the crop circles, and we're going to spend a whole week. It's a little different because there's less didactic and training. This is for people who really get that already, because during the day we're actually going to new crop circles, and we do sort of teaching periods and meditations in the crop circles during the day, and then we have this fantastic 1,800-acre farm that's near Alton Barnes, where the landing of the ET craft in '92 happened with CSETI, but also where many of the most incredible crop circles have appeared over the last 20 or 30 years. And that will be in July in England. So all that information for the people who want to come is at etcontactnow.com. And what we're planning to do is also, it's looking like the film Sirius will have enough of it completed that we're hoping that we will be at well, first of all, I'm going to be at Sundance, just doing a small sort of a trailer clip of the film, and then we're planning to also be at South by Southwest, and around that time in March, have perhaps a 3-day expedition out in the hill country of Texas, which should be a lot of fun. So we haven't planned the dates of that yet, but just stay tuned. And if you want to get on our mailing list, you can go to the website and sign up for our information and newsletters and everything for free. You can do that at any of the sites, disclosureproject.org or ET Contact Now. And what we'll do is let you know when we get those dates hammered down. This is all it's very dynamic because the production company is still working on the film, and we still have some production elements to do with the genetic work on this little ET body that you have heard about that we've worked on. You can see the updates for that, by the way, at Sirius.neverendinglight.com. And we have a professor of genetics who's one of the most renowned geneticists in the world, setting up and running the genetic tests. And we've also had other experts look at this small ET specimen, which we think is a 1 to 2 year old baby, that has looked at it and has concluded that it, number one, is not an aborted fetus, and number two, does not conform to any known skeletal genetic defect or malformation. And by the way, the person who did the examination of the X-rays and CT scan for this is the leading expert in the world on skeletal anomalies and defects in children and fetuses. So we're having some really top-drawer people examine this, but some of this material we're hoping to get into this film series, and so, of course, we're racing our deadlines to do that. But anyway, all things are moving forward very, very quickly now, and we're getting into the sort of final stretch in the next month or so. So even though the film won't be completely finished, we're going to do a presentation and have a trailer that we can show at Sundance this year, which is in January, and then we hope we can have the whole thing finished in time for South by Southwest, which is, of course, the big film and technology conference that's in Austin, Texas every year. Interestingly about that, there's a group called the Foo Fighters, and Dave Grohl will be the keynote speaker at South by Southwest, and of course he's quite interested in UFOs, and in fact the word Foo Fighter is from World War II, and it was used by the military. It came from the word foe, fire, and firefighters, that were these UFOs that were flying all around our aircraft during the war with Germany. And it was interesting because at that time, the Foo Fighters, not the rock group, but the things that were actually in the air flying around our aircraft, we thought it was a secret Nazi weapon, but the Nazis thought it was a secret Allied weapon because the same thing was happening to them. And a good friend of mine, who I think, Bill, since you're a doctor, you'll enjoy this, who is a hematologist, pathologist in Denver, John Altshuler. Dr. Altshuler was the nephew of General Jimmy Doolittle, and General Doolittle was a very famous general in World War II. And FDR, Roosevelt, sent General Doolittle over to Europe to look into what in the hell these Foo Fighters were. And he came back to the White House, and General Doolittle told President Roosevelt, well, sir, those are, quote, and I'm quoting here, interplanetary vehicles. So people wonder how long there has been interest in investigations on this, and it goes at least back to then, if not before. And this, I know, is a very reliable account because Dr. Altshuler was as straight a shooter as they come, and he was told this directly by General Doolittle, who was his uncle. So I think that, you know, when you it's sort of an interesting confluence that we're going to be wrapping up this film in time for it to be at South by Southwest. And the lead guy for this rock band, the Foo Fighters, which is one of the largest in the world now, is the keynote speaker. And the name of his band is basically means UFO. I mean, that was what a UFO was called in the European theater of operations during World War II. So I think it's all quite an interesting set of coincidences and very exciting.
There's a lot going on these days.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah,
indeed.
You know, I asked my ET team, if you want to call them that, about the upcoming 21st of December thing, and their take, I mean, because I have friends who talk about this, and they've got all these doomsday scenarios in their head, and, you know, even if it's on a subtle plane, it's going to be such a radical change that nothing will ever be the same again and all this kind of thing. And my ETs seem to say, no, that's not their orientation at all. It's extreme excitement all over that there will be change, but it's an exciting change, and it's something that they're very much looking forward to, and that's part of what this whole connection with us is all about.
Well, that's right, and I think that what they understand very well is that we're at this pivotal point in our civilization that everything from the Mayan calendar to the Hopi prophecy to teachings from peoples from all over the world has sort of foreseen, and that is a time when we're going to come together as a global civilization and make a very large change in how we live on the planet. And I think that 20 to 100 years from now will be more different from today than today is from 10,000 years ago in the era of cavemen. And I think that this is it's very exciting, and the rate of development, conscious evolution, as well as material evolution is going to take a big jump forward, and this interstellar cosmic perspective is a key part of it, as are these technologies, because I was doing an interview, or I had a conference call recently with a man who's hosting a big event around the Mayan calendar ending, and his name is Michael Short, and he was on this radio show with me a couple weeks ago, and one of the things we talked about is that it is a universal moment, and that the technologies and the way we live on this material planet is a reflection of the aggregate consciousness of the people. In other words, if you look at how we're living today with all of our energy technologies and transportation technologies are destructive. They burn things, or they split the atom and cause poisonous cancer-causing radiation in the way of nuclear power, or it's burning a fuel or exploding a rocket. It's all explosive, violent, but that also kind of is reflecting this end of the Kali Yuga, the end of this cycle that we're closing up, where there's been a lot of warfare and strife and division, whereas the new technologies are in sync with the new consciousness of unity, peace, homeostasis, balance, where you're pulling energy out of the fabric of space-time. You're not burning or destroying anything. You're not splitting the atom, causing huge amounts of radiation like in Fukushima that's poisoning the entire west coast of America right now. You're not burning coal that's dirtying the air and causing cancer and lung disease. So, and even in the way of the
alignment with unity.
And exactly, and it's a unity consciousness-based technology. And so all of this is kind of has to happen together, because you really can't go to this next level of science and technology without a concomitant leap in consciousness, for a couple of reasons. One, people just wouldn't get it, and number two, it'd be dangerous, because one of the things, the conversations I've had many times with people at the Pentagon and the CIA is that, they'll pull me aside and they say, Dr. Greer, you know that these kind of really advanced high voltage systems that do all this, what they call WSFM, weird science and frickin' magic is what they call it at the CIA, could be turned into a weapon. I said, yes, of course. I said, I took care of many people who were killed with steak knives. I mean, you don't need a high-tech system to kill someone. But that begs this larger question of, do we go forward with 7 billion people cannibalizing the power with these destructive energy technologies, or do we come together as a people, decide to live together in unity, in peace, in collective security, and bring out the technologies that would eliminate poverty and injustice and give us a period of abundance and a foundation for social development and conscious evolution going thousands of years into the future, where we're living in harmony with Gaia, with the earth. This is this choice that we have to make, and we have to make it all of us together. And so, in a sense, even the material problems of the planet have at their root a spiritual source. And so the solution has to be spiritual. And as Einstein said, no problem was ever solved from the level of consciousness that created it. And so we have to achieve a different type of consciousness of peaceful cooperation. Humans are always going to have differences. You get two people together, you're going to have three opinions. But it doesn't mean you have to pull out weapons and blow each other up. And so I think that we have to find a way of going forward as a people, as a civilization, in a way that's peaceful and unified, because this next level of development is one that is based in higher consciousness, and the technologies are actually flowing out of a unity state of consciousness and physics that are incredibly powerful, but they can be misused. The early stages of that have already been done in the last 50 years, where we have taken some of these technologies that have been classified and used them to target extraterrestrial vehicles and shoot them down or disable them. And that has happened dozens of times that I'm aware of personally. And I think that this is another reason why the whole world needs to know about this issue and why disclosure is so important, but also why there has to be a very clear consciousness behind what we're doing even with these sciences and how they're going to be utilized. Because what we don't need to do is reinvent the mistakes of the last 100 to 200 years going forward in the next decade or two. And so we're at this point where is it a huge change that has to happen, both in consciousness but also in social and political thinking and deep spirituality. Not necessarily religiosity, but deep spirituality. So, well,
personally, actually, in the same direction, and this is not a plug or anything, but just to talk about how all this has affected me, is that I've started a new company based on the whole idea of unity and bringing new energies into the world. I call it Coherence Apps, and it's inspired to actually transmit through iPhones or smartphones healing energies that are individualized to people, so that whatever's going on in health can be transformed by the energy itself.
Right.
I don't think that can be made into any kind of a weaponized system. So I think there's going to be a lot of these kind of things as we get inspired to move in these directions.
Right, right. And ultimately, though, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to live on this planet in a compassionate way, not just compassionate with Gaia, but compassionate with our fellow humans, because many people talk about these apocalyptic things. I said, well, when you have almost half of the world doesn't have apothecary, doesn't have plumbing, doesn't have adequate food or electricity or refrigeration. You have 7 billion people, and only a small number of them are living well. And they're living well because they're at the top of the pyramid in this very destructive energy system that was based in the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s of burning oil and gas and coal, and the mid-20th century with a nuclear power, which is even more destructive in many ways. If you doubt it, look at what happened in Japan. But I think that what we have to figure out is that even to be compassionate with our fellow humans, meaning all of humanity, that these science and technologies have to come out, but that we also have to be wise enough to bring them out in a way where they are used only for peaceful purposes, and that we have the means to ensure that. And actually, the head of the Air Force, there's an office of future technologies, believe it or not, and the colonel who was head of that I've met with, and I talked about this at great length, because he knew about this area of science, and I said yes, but it gets to be a chicken egg thing. Do we keep letting so many things happen in the world because of the poverty and injustice that we just devolve further and further into conflict, or do we bring out sciences and technologies that would alleviate poverty and this conflict and stop the environmental damage, but at the same time put reasonable means in place to ensure that they're not weaponized? And I said, we're going to have to figure out how to do that. And this is the huge challenge of the last 100 years that no one has wanted to talk about. What's happened is that the classified programs have just slapped security clearances on them and national security orders on these technologies and says, no, the world can't have these yet. Meanwhile, the world is dying. And and the environment is dying, and we're suffocating Gaia, and the polar ice caps are melting. And you have over half of 7 billion people living in abject poverty. So this becomes something where when you look at this, the ETs are watching this as well, frankly, and many people who've had contact do get a message about the need for healing on this planet and also to help the environment. And many people who've had contact have had that as a message from the ETs, and I think that's a message that we continue to receive, and that certainly I've had. So, well, I think we're about out of time. I don't know if you have anything else you want to share in the next couple of minutes, Bill, about your experiences, because you've had such great ones over the last couple of years.
Well, the main thing to communicate that I would say from my own experience is that anyone can actually do this. I mean, literally, there's nothing, I mean, this is not false humility. There's nothing special about me that made me available to do this. I think it's just the willingness to actually do it. Give yourself permission to actually do it.
Right.
And the techniques are developed through CSETI and through Stephen's, DVDs and books and everything to get yourself ready for it. And then it's just a matter of actually taking the step and doing it and believing that it can happen.
Right, and if you think it can happen, it will, and if you think it can't, it won't. Exactly. And so much of it has to do with your realizing that those of us who are in this is why I love the growing circle of people from all walks of life who are having this experience. I mean, a few years ago, there was an old talk show host named Art Bell who had a show on Coast to Coast AM, and he'd like for me to be on his show. And he had a contest at one point to see if people could really remote view, and so he had put something on his refrigerator with a magnet and asked for people to remote view it. And it was sort of a contest that he did to see if anyone could really do that. And the person who called in and who got it was a man named Bob Haregrove, who lives in the San Diego area, who had come to a couple of the CSETI week-long expeditions where we teach these meditation and remote viewing techniques, and he nailed it precisely. And this guy he's sort of a saw-the-earth guy and, a title examiner and real estate guy. I mean, he wasn't sort of a guru that had spent 18 years on a bed of nails or done any esoteric ascetic training. And I remember Art Bell going, my God, this is exactly correct, and you're the only person. How did you? He said, and the guy said, well, I just went for a week out in the desert with Dr. Greer and learned to do these things, and it's easy. And so the fact is that it has nothing to do whether you've spent 40 years in an ashram or not. In reality, it's about knowing you can do it and some instruction and then saying, I can do this. And so I love telling that story because Bob is such a great guy and just, again, salt of the earth sort of, not good old boy, but I mean just sort of a regular guy. And he's certainly not someone who's, has hair down to his back and braids with a flowing purple robe or anything, and he's just a regular dude, and it was such a fantastic thing that he and thousands of other people like that. And so I think what you're saying is really key, Bill, that everyone needs to understand that they absolutely can do this, can make contact, and that if they just give themselves to it and say, I can do it, and learn the techniques, it becomes something that just flows, and it's really exciting when it starts happening.
Kind of why not?
And why not? It's fun. It's awesome. Well, again, thank you very much, Dr. Bill Gray, for being with us today. We're about out of time, and appreciate you sharing all your accounts with us.
Thank you.
And to the folks at the World Puja Network, thank you for hosting us here every 2 weeks. And to all of you, if you're interested in this next expedition to Marco Island, Florida, it'll be in February, and the information's at etcontactnow.com. And look forward to seeing all of you there. Okay, keep looking up, and God bless. Bye-bye.